call this meeting to order. I believe it's about 6:31. Is that correct? Would appreciate a roll call.
Anderson. Here. Hartke. Kibler.
Here.
Quisenberry. Here. Schwartz. Here. Rosales.
Here.
Maxwell.
Here. It appears we have a quorum. The next item would be the approval of the minutes, and I'd like to make a note that under item 10 of the minutes, or of the, I'm sorry, we need to go back and approve the minutes, I'm sorry. So I would like a motion to approve the minutes of the Facilities Committee meeting January 6, 2015.
So moved.
Mr. Rosales? Mr. Anderson? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. Approve the agenda. I would like to note that we will be moving item 10, which would be the LED lighting for the courthouse, and that will not be funded from the court's construction fund, but regular budget line item, and we will be moving that item down to 12 and call it 12C. I would like a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Kibler. Second. Mr. Rosales. All in favor? Aye. Against? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you all. At this time, we have on the agenda the public participation. I have 3 slips right now. Are there any other right now that need to come forward? If not, I will go ahead and proceed with the public participation portion of this agenda. And I will try to do these in the order that we received. The first one I would like to call is Mr. Stuart Levy, or Levy, if I pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry. Please come up and take a place at the front desk here and state your name and address. Please turn your mic on, would you please?
This one? Yeah.
There you
Okay,
go.
good.
Thank you.
So my name is Stuart Levy, and I live at 1108 Foley Avenue in Champaign. But I'd like to give a statement on behalf of Robin Arbiter, who could not be here this evening. So I'll spell her name, ROBINARBITER. She writes, my name is Robin Arbiter. I live at 1511 Hunter in the Learman neighborhood, the closest neighborhood to the Champaign County Jail. 2 years ago, stakeholders from the neighborhood advocated for alternatives to incarceration. And when we asked about the county's intention to raise $20 million for jail construction, we were assured that this was in no way the amount that county staff and board planned to spend, but rather just a response to the theoretical question of how much could be raised in a bond drive. We were clear on our preference for funding to be spent keeping people out of jail. Imagine my surprise to find the county now entertaining discussion about jail construction projects that will cost in excess of $32 million. $32 million to shore up infrastructure, and yet no substantive setting aside of a similarly serious amount of money for programs and services that could make the jail almost obsolete. Even half of those $32 million could transform the county's services to those inappropriately incarcerated and to those at risk of incarceration. It could mend individuals and families harmed through the social and economic violence heaped upon people of color, on poor people, and people with severe mental illness. It could support wraparound treatment, employment, counseling, addiction intervention, crisis care, housing, and family systems resources. It could replace valuable services that have been lost in the community like day treatment, detox, and the soon-to-be unfunded access initiative. As long as these prevention, intervention, and options to alternatives to incarceration are not fully funded, I oppose any funding on any jail construction project. Let the downtown building be sold. Let the satellite walls crumble. Incarceration should be a last resort for the person who cannot or will not accept help for violent behavior, not the default setting for the people that the board is just unwilling to serve in appropriate and effective ways. Thank you. Actually, if there's a moment, another moment. I just remember when the discussion on this was starting, Chris Alex making a comment to the effect, why are we looking to solve the problem of public safety in the most capital intensive way possible, meaning building a jail? I thought that was a very good statement at the time, and I think it's a good thing to remember tonight while we're listening to the Kimmy's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. The next slip that I have is from Dorothy Vera Weiss. Would you like to come forward?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to provide this input. When I read through the Gorski-Reifsteck-Kimmy report on the jail and sheriff's operations master planning, I was surprised to see the cost estimate of more than $30 million. And of course, that doesn't include interest to pay off a construction bond. I'm both very disappointed and also very grateful for the report. Disappointed because after spending $150,000 for the consultant's fees and expenses, we have a report that says we need to spend much more than the county can afford. Disappointed that the report has virtually no breakdown of the costs so that the board could decide which items to approve and which items to forego. Disappointed that they didn't present an option of building lower security housing for lower risk individuals. And disappointed that they didn't present an option for the smaller jail population that would result if recommendations from the recommendations on alternatives to incarceration from the NIC, ILPP, and Community Justice Task Force reports were followed. In fact, their plans are based on a theoretical capacity of the current jails that's about 20% higher than the actual functional capacity and recent occupancy levels. And I realize that part of what they presented is based on the instructions that they were given by the county when they signed the contract. So why am I grateful? I'm grateful because the report makes it crystal clear that we need a paradigm shift on how to ensure the safety of the people in Champaign County. The current paradigm of arrests, bookings, holding pending trial, serving time after conviction and sentencing isn't effective enough at preventing future arrests, and it's way too expensive. The revised paradigm would include community resources for people with mental health and substance abuse problems, a drop-off crisis assessment center, a detox center like used to exist here, increased use of assessment for pretrial release, evaluation of the racial disparities in arrests and detention and a response to those findings, more rehabilitation programs and reentry programs to reduce recidivism. Creating these programs will take a concerted effort by the county and community organizations and will need investment of time and financial resources and designation of county staff or committee to oversee it. The sheriff and local police departments have already expressed interest in at least some of these alternatives. I realize this is beyond the role of the facilities committee, but I hope that you will keep the new paradigm in mind as you consider what changes are actually needed in the physical facilities for the jail, so that funds will be available for programs that can address the underlying problems. We need to make the shift to a paradigm that we can afford and that will be more effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I have a slip from a Mark Enslin. would you like to come forward and state your name and give us your address? Thank you.
My name is Mark Enslin. I live at 207 West Indiana in Urbana. And I've been present for some discussions of the county board related to the safety budget and where it might go. And I don't know what the discussions might be in relation to this jail report, this facilities construction report, but I just wanted to underline something that Robin Arbiter said in her note. Even half of $32 million could transform the county's services to those who are inappropriately incarcerated and those at risk of incarceration. And there are people that come to mind when I read these phrases, particular people that I know. It could mend individuals and families harmed through the social and economic violence heaped upon people of color, poor people, people with severe mental illness. It could support wraparound treatment, employment, counseling, addiction intervention, crisis care, housing, and family systems resources. It could replace valuable services that have been lost in the community, like day treatment, detox, and the soon-to-be unfunded Access Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enslin. Those are all the slips that I have right now. Are there any others that would like to come forward and talk? And if so, please submit a slip. If there are no other forms coming forward, then I will go ahead and close the public participation, and again, thank the 3 people that did participate. All right, the next item of business on the agenda would be the Sheriff's Operations Master Planning Report from Gorski Reifstack Architects and Kimmy and Associates. I asked the members of the committee. Yes,
What about communications?
okay, I'm sorry. Are there any communications from the committee? Any communications from Deb or Van, anything? Okay. Thank you, James, for calling that to my attention. All right. At this point in time, we're down at item 7, and we will ask that Gorski Reifstack and Kimmy and Associates at this time to give their report. Now, before we start, I would ask that the members of the committee hold their questions until the report is complete. At that point in time, there will be time for questions. Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm Chuck Reifstack with Gorski Reifstack Architects. To my left is Dennis Kimmy with Kimmy and Associates. To my right is Jim Gleason from GHR Engineers. And behind us in support tonight, 2 other people from my office, Kevin Price and Sean Bott. Of course, we didn't create the report in a vacuum in our offices. We worked with a lot of people here in the county. A lot of the sheriff's staff, and then a lot of county administrators and other staff people as well. The names are on the screen. So part 1 of the work, you'll recall we came to your committee and the county board in October to present the findings of part 1, which was primarily an audit of existing conditions and deteriorated conditions physically with the downtown building as well. And in October, the county board gave us direction to not cease examining the downtown facility for corrections, still continue to examine it as a solution for the law enforcement, and also to look at the satellite facility as well for law enforcement and corrections. Today, we're here to talk to you about part two, which is two options. One of which, option one, is jail renovation and addition at the satellite site, and law enforcement renovation at the downtown site. Option two is jail renovation and addition at the satellite site, and law enforcement addition at the satellite jail.
As we got started with the project, we identified a series of objectives that we wanted to attain based on the mission the county gave us. The first was that what we were going to propose to you were long-term solutions. These weren't Band-Aid solutions. They were meant to last a while in the 20 to 30-year range, and that the jail capacity, the capability when we were done, was to basically end up about the current capacity, which historically has been thought to be 313 beds. We wanted to reinforce the Champaign County Sheriff's Office's mission for both the jail and law enforcement, which is in the report, as well as the new inmate classification system. If you remembered, one of the products of the report of the Institute for Law and Policy Planning, ILPP, was that the county needed a new classification system at the jail. The county took that recommendation. They did an additional contract with a specialist in classification and developed it and have been implementing it probably since about a year ago now, more than a year ago. And so that's enacted. So we wanted to be sure that what we did reflected and supported that classification system. We wanted to address the major jail housing needs that weren't being met by the existing facilities, and in particular, that meant special needs and female housing capabilities. Fundamentally, based on some of the other comments and the other studies, we wanted to, generally speaking, improve the safety, the security, and the environmental quality of the facilities. You know, if you remember the famous comments about deplorable and depressing facilities that we got from the NIC and others. And then we wanted to solve specific identified building and support problems. And we wanted to do that building upon past studies and reports, such as those by the National Institute of Corrections, which is NIC up there, the Institute for Law and Policy Planning, ILPP, the Criminal Justice Task Force, CJTF, and also you'd had a body of engineering studies that had been done over multiple years prior to those studies. We also wanted to address identified problems as revealed by architectural, engineering, and corrections walkthroughs that our team did. Also from a staff problem identification exercise we did. We actively involved the staff in identifying what they thought were the problems they were facing with the facilities. And that revealed a lot of great detail that we could work from, and it shows up in the recommendations that we're making. And also we had a series of planning team meetings to talk about what the current needs were and the future needs were that we could use to base space estimates upon. Now, in the prior presentation, we talked, a lot about the downtown facility. We really didn't talk about the satellite jail, although if you had a chance to look at the report, the part one of it has an extensive evaluation of the issues related to the satellite facility. So this is just a summary, and by the way, we have notes up there. You'll see page 56. So I'm assuming you're getting this presentation later. So, if you want to find out where that analysis starts, it starts on page 56 of the report. First thing we identified, beside the issue of special needs and female housing in general, that there were some fundamental housing challenges in the existing satellite housing units. There were blind spots, there were view conflicts, all of the housing was double tier, and if you're not familiar with what that means, it's basically the housing units are developed, as you see in that picture, with cells stacked upon cells, with adjacent to a two-story open day room, with a walkway that gets the second tier stairway, gets the people from the second tier down to the first floor. And then another thing that we noticed when we started analyzing the facility, only 4% of the capacity were in single occupancy cells. And when you look at the inmate classification system, we have certain categories of inmates like high security, disciplinary detention, protective custody, certain categories of mental health and medical health that need to be in single occupancy. And this is one of the areas in which the facility was deficient. And with the safety and security challenge that the housing posed, and those kind of conditions, that conditions really were unsuitable for special needs and female inmates, which is one of the reasons why the special needs inmates show up in holding cells in the booking area and not in the housing pods themselves, where they ought to be. And just a piece of history on the single occupancy, you may or may not recall this, but we talked about the original downtown jail was designed all single occupancy with the exception of one small work release dorm. And that is really the preferred operational condition from a safety, security, property protection, and accountability standpoint. But over the years, in order to deal with costs across the country, people started gravitating toward multiple occupancy settings like double occupancy cells and dormitories. It's not preferred operationally, so when we get a number as low as 4%, it's a fundamental problem with the facilities. The intake booking area itself is too small, it's poorly organized, and really the character of it, and again, this goes back to some of that depressing and deplorable comments that you got out of the earlier studies. It's really inconsistent with the mission statement of the Sheriff's Office for the jail. It's definitely inconsistent with the classification system objectives of the jail as they're now established. There is no indoor exercise. We have outdoor exercise space, but there's no indoor exercise space, which means, given the weather, for substantial times of the year, people aren't getting out and getting exercise. Facility lacks adequate space for professional and video visiting, insufficient space for inmate programming, insufficient medical health clinic and mental health space, inadequate scattered administrative space. And then on the engineering side, the real headliner is the mechanical systems are inadequate. They use lots of energy and money, requires repairs and updates all the time. Now we get then to the jail housings, starting on page 147 of the report. The real goals there were to provide safer beds that by their nature were more responsive to actual inmate needs rather than more bed capacity overall. Additionally, as we discussed in our planning team, we wanted those beds to be flexible in their design because populations change and the mix of populations change, so we wanted to be versatile in what we were providing. The end result in both options, 1 and 2, because again, we stopped looking at the downtown for jails, so we just have the satellite jail option, is 307 beds total proposed at the satellite. Now, through the concepts we have working with the satellite facility, we've got the single occupancy housing count increased to about 22% of the total. Now, in my opinion, and I think the staff's opinion, in terms of the classification system, that's still lower than we want it to be given the classification populations we're dealing with. So actually, one of the things that came to us was that basically if the population falls or it doesn't fill that up, that's actually a good thing in a way because we'll be able to take a lot of those double occupancy cells that exist and actually operate them single occupancy, which will better fit the classifications, some of the classifications we're dealing with. And that in turn fundamentally gives us greater safety and flexibility. Now the existing housing that's there in pods A and B, based on our plan, provides 143 of the 307 beds. And the important point there is that right now we consider ourselves to have 182 beds between those two pods, 101 and 82 in another pod. But when you apply the classification system requirements and standards on the premise that going forward we're going to meet current standards, which we probably will have to when we do this much renovation anyway. Things will have to be brought up to current standard levels. We're going to only get about 143 capacity out of those existing 182 beds. And again, the kind of standards we were working with are the Illinois jail standards themselves, the Illinois plumbing code, and by the way, that's one that's definitive. And let me give you an example how. It's very clear in the plumbing code that there has to be 1 shower for every 8 inmates. We have cell blocks in the satellite that were designed originally at 24, so it worked. But then when we faced crowding pressures historically, we loaded them up with more bunks. And so they technically don't meet current Illinois plumbing code. To meet code, because there's really no place to add showers in those units, have to pull the capacity back to 24. New housing proposed in the options provides 164 of the 307 beds. The real feature there is a special needs housing pod and a female-male flexible use housing pod. In addition, in the planning meetings, the staff came up with a really great idea that I think really works with the classification system and also minimizing the impact on the short-termers that we get in the facility who otherwise go deep into the housing pods. And that's the idea of a pre-classification / 0 to 72-hour pod. So many people we know that come into the jail facility get turned around and released very quickly. And they generally have a pretty good idea who that is. So this unit we can have near the booking area, only take them that far into the facility, and as they're released, take them back out. The other purpose, as I mentioned, was a pre-classification area, so when they have people come into the jail that they're not sure about and they don't know, and have to undergo some observation before they make it a classification assessment, we have a place to do that where we can associate it with classification officers. Excuse me. Jail support space needs. Again, this is not just about housing. We really needed to address deficiencies that have been identified by ourselves, others, and the staff, plus had to account for the additional needs in support space that's generated by consolidating the populations. Some of the critical components that we're addressing in this proposal is program space, classroom space, counseling areas, and the indoor exercise that's currently missing. Space for community mental health, reentry, and electronic home detention. Visitation space, particularly new space for the new video visiting areas, and also the contact professional visiting space that we don't currently have in the jail. Intake, holding, and release booking area. Medical and mental health care and classification, and as we discovered, that may sound like an odd fit to you, but actually the classification staff, the medical staff, and the mental health staff work very closely in assessing an inmate and establishing what their classification should be, where they should be placed, and what services they need to have. Administration and staff support, basic things like laundry and storage. The kitchen is designed big enough for the total population, but the laundry there is not, as an example. And then also some unassigned area for future programs that we don't know about now, but we want to be sure there's space in there for it, so we're not trying to squeeze people out of one place to open up space for another, which has been the history in the facility. And I know this is hard to read a little bit, but I'm not going to go through all that. These are all the non-housing components, and what we did is we took a look in the first column of the square footage in the downtown jail that's allocated for these different functions like master control, health care, video appearance, commissary, et cetera. We looked at the totals allocated for the same functions in the satellite facility, and then in the third column, totaled them up. And if you look at the bottom line number, there's roughly 36,974 gross square feet allocated to those functions today. In the proposal, we're actually allocating 37,000 square feet, or about the same, and we're actually getting more out of it, and I think that is one of the virtues of consolidating. We also have the law enforcement question. The sheriff's law enforcement operations, there are space needs there. And again, we're addressing inadequacies that we've identified. The really critical components where there's the greatest demand for fixes is in evidence processing and storage and in record storage, which for records also includes convenient access because they've got some really terrible access issues in terms of getting at their records. For example, many of the records are not in the law enforcement area for law enforcement, they're in the jail. And you have to go down in through the security perimeter, be admitted by master control staff, and actually penetrate master control, which is a fundamental security no-no, to go get law enforcement records. And also the records are spread out about 8 different spaces, including some of it in a mechanical fan room. And evidence itself is also spread among 8 different locations. Other critical needs are things like classroom and tactical training. And training, of course, is a critical issue. And all the issues that are arising today with respect to police behavior always comes back to well-trained personnel. So having training space is critical. And things like staff lockers. But then we also have other components which are really better shape in the downtown jail than the previous set: investigations, patrol and staff facilities, administration and clerical, and lobby. When we come to projection of space needs for law enforcement in the first column, and again on the left are all the different components that we're looking at within the law enforcement area. Right now in the downtown area, if you include allocations that are in the mechanical fan room, we're roughly at about 17,000 gross square feet. We estimate from the concepts we develop that we need about 23,000 square feet downtown in option 1, and in option 2 about the same. And though option 2 is actually more efficient, and you might otherwise expect a lower number, the number winds up being about the same because we're in the option 2 also solving some jail problems in the law enforcement area, namely in the area of training, staff locker area, and staff break room area. So this is a graphic image of option one. And I don't know, do I have an arrow here? Okay, there we go. And this is all oriented to the north on the top. This is Learman on the left, and this is Bartell Road, goes to the south and then wraps around back to the east. This is your existing satellite facility. This is the addition that's proposed, and then we're also proposing additions of parking, not only because it's inadequate today, but we're going to be, of course, adding more staff and more visitors to the facility. The other thing that we're proposing in this concept is right now, if an arresting officer in a patrol car comes, he enters off Learman, goes around the Circle Drive, and comes like this into the facility. Part of the proposal is a new intake area, and rather than extend that awkward drive, we're basically suggesting it's better to come off of Bartell more directly. And then this driveway begins to serve offenders who are on the electronic home detention program, and also new supply, storage, and delivery at that point. Then option two is basically the same in terms of the jail addition and the internals, with the exception of one area, which I'll point out in a little bit. And of course, the big thing, the addition of a new law enforcement center, here shown in a single level configuration. There's no internal design, so this is just a shape representing the amount of square feet that we talked about. With this option, then, all of the parking at the front remains untouched, but what was the staff parking gets redesignated for additional public parking. And then staff parking is put in the back, and that staff parking will now serve law enforcement staff and the jail staff, and they'll enter from this side, and then the jail staff will work their way into the building over here. Now, there are most all of the detail that I want to show you, the solutions, are common to both options because, again, the satellite jail is basically the same for both options. So I wanted to walk you through these things. Again, if we look at the new jail facility, in essence, what we're proposing is a new booking and intake area that has a much improved character, organization, and more space to handle the needs that can't be handled well now. With that, then, a new sally port. And that sally port, in part, has additional parking inside of it to keep your transport vans and other vehicles out of the weather and hopefully lasting longer. Additional overflow, there's my arrow. Additional overflow parking for arresting officers. A new intake area, new shift commander space, that's part of new administrative allocation. An unassigned area, and that's assigned there because we think probably if something comes in the future, it'll be in relationship to things like reentry programs, pretrial release, and so forth. And in particular, if pretrial release winds up involving space, it's best by the booking area where people are first coming in and need to be interviewed. To the immediate right of that is that pre-classification 0 to 72-hour pod that we talked about. That's in green. And again, so the movement pattern is short and direct and back out if need be. A new medical clinic with classification office space. And that medical clinic then associated with a new special needs pod. So we make a strong connection there, but also a strong connection to intake where many of the initial health challenges, whether it be mental or medical, occur in this area and are first identified in this area. And then new training facility space that would be located in this area, which also doubles as program space. We figure that that can be a multi-purpose operation. And maybe, depending on which option we take, do some initial law enforcement staff training as well by developing an outside entry. And then we have basic support, storage, housekeeping, mechanical space, a lot of which is lacking in the current building today. And then this would be where the new male flex pod would be in this location. And then the way the design is organized, there would be a natural fit for an additional pod someday if that was needed. There's a lot of stuff going on inside the jail. That evolved almost a more interesting part than the new stuff that was being added. It starts at the lobby, and if you remember, there was a lot of criticism in the NIC report and the ILPP report, which we agreed with, about not only that the lobby was undersized, but it really presented a terrible face to the operation. So what we're proposing is taking out space, there's the arrow, taking out what is now the video arraignment space so that we can open up, expand the lobby, provide more locker space, and then open it up to glass, so we're now introducing natural light and making it a much more friendly entry. but also providing much more visitor-friendly female and male washroom areas that are compliant with the new ADA standards that are coming out, which are more expansive in terms of the amount of space you have to allocate and clearances than we have today, and which these spaces in here really don't satisfy. But the lobby is a key part of that change to start with. Moving east of the lobby, where we have master control, we really wanted to ramp up the program space, the inmate program space in the facility. So what the idea that we came up with as a team, this includes sheriff's staff, all the stuff in the green would be devoted to program activities. Right now, all that's devoted to program activities is this classroom area. This is the captain's office. This is the office for the 2 lieutenants. And this is the badly undersized healthcare area. But by turning all of these over to programs, we basically create a program center that's under the watchful eye of the master control officer, which should give some reassurances to program service providers. And it makes it very convenient for the service providers to come into the building and access the spaces where they'll be interacting with the inmates. In terms of the housing pods themselves, in order to maximize the population while staying compliant with standards, we need to add some day room tables because we had too few for the population that was there. Some of these units will be depopulated back to their original numbers, like these where they were 30, are now 32, need to go back to 24 based on the square foot of the day room, the table capacity, and the shower capacity. One of the interesting parts of this design is if you follow these lines, they initially designed it out in what we call a pod remote or an indirect surveillance fashion where all the dividing walls of the day rooms line up on a single vantage point. And generally in that kind of concept, you then put the staff post in that middle area. Well, in reality, for whatever reasons they had, at that time they put it off to the side. And we proposed that that be taken away. We moved the electronics and put that control center where it can see everything. But to see everything in Pod A, this was a solid wall rather than a glazed wall like these areas that give the view into the units. So we're proposing that those walls be taken out, and they can because the structure goes over the top. It doesn't hold the structure, and make those glazed walls like these walls are so we can actually see what's going on. Other changes, in order to get indoor exercise, we propose sectioning off the outdoor exercise area into an indoor half and an indoor part and an outdoor part. We don't really want to lose the outdoor opportunity, but we want to gain the indoor opportunity that gives us 365-day-a-year opportunities for exercise. Okay. The Pod B renovation, basically a lot of the same concepts with the exercise, the repositioning of the control center. But also to clear those views up, there was one oddball wall that was right here, and this was a major staff complaint because some of our medical and mental health inmates actually are housed here. But this is so tight and that wall's on such a bad angle that they cannot get a direct view into that area. So we propose removing that wall and cleaning up that view. Now this is probably the most interesting area of renovation. This is in the southwest quadrant, and for reference sake, that's the yellow of the lobby. And a lot of the changes that are proposed here are driven by that lobby location. Right now, this is the booking area, and all these red dashed lines are existing walls that we propose to be demoed to clear that area out. And in its place, we propose to have a legitimate jail administrative area so that the captain, the lieutenants, any support staff, conference room are all consolidated in an area off the lobby where the public can access it easily. Also a public meeting room where staff have a convenient space outside of their area and perimeter to meet with the public as they need to provide storage area linked to the old Sally Port, which makes it convenient. Right now, there's very small amount of storage in this building, which is why they took over the old work release dorm at the downtown facility, and that's where their storage is. And then they ship it back and forth from downtown over to here. Well, so we need storage area if the downtown's no longer being used for jail, and that's the location. We have space for reentry program and programs here that exist, and then the electronic home detention operation will be here. This pink area is existing non-contact visitation, and if you've been in the jail, you'll see that all the new video visiting accommodations are kind of jammed into the back area here. We propose to take what is the sergeant's office that was meant to be next to booking, which now will be over by the new booking, and turn that into a legitimate two-person per station video visiting area. So mom and dad, father and son, whatever, can visit at the same time via video, as well as continue to visit non-contact if that's their choice. But a key part that we're also adding, proposing to add, is professional visiting space, small scale, medium scale, and large scale, which has the possibility, if we decide we want it later, to even accommodate family contact visits. Now, that visiting here is consciously put between the lobby area and our program staff so that these contact visiting spaces are available to them for people who come from the outside, and also the inmate population who can come from this side to access the professional contact visit area. Now, solutions that are different between options 1 and 2. Well, the biggest part, obviously, is option 1 for renovating the downtown sheriff's facility. And again, the biggest thing that we should note about that to pull this off, given the magnitude of the mechanical, electrical problems that are downtown, it needs to be closed for 12 months to pull that off. And from a rental point of view, we probably need to plan on 15 months, because depending on what you rent, there may be considerable changes to that rental space to accommodate law enforcement needs. Roughly speaking, we estimate that about 17,000 square feet of space based on today's amount of allocation for law enforcement is needed. And again, depending on what's available at the time the decision is made to do this, if you decide to do so, may have either minor or major modifications of the rental space that's available. So therefore, the cost of the improvements can vary widely by rental option. Some of the particular challenges working with rental space includes providing secure space for evidence, having emergency power generation, which is not a guarantee in rental space, and being sure that we can accommodate the high-tech communications and other networks that's key to the law enforcement operations. Also, when we get down to it, we're going to have to move twice, so we'll pay the cost of 2 moves, and then whatever utilities we pay at that rental space will be on top of what you're already paying for the utilities at your existing buildings. So this is just a kind of a glimpse of some of the things we're thinking, starting with the upper level. We're proposing that the upper level of law enforcement largely be untouched, in spite of the fact that there's a lot of things about this we don't like and don't think works very well. This was the existing evidence storage, or the original evidence storage space that was, I don't know how fast it was outgrown, but it might have been outgrown within a couple years after the building opened, which is why we evolved to 8 different areas within the law enforcement area for our evidence storage. But we proposed to consolidate evidence elsewhere and then make this space available for a suite of spaces for investigations, with the investigation officers are already located right around through here. Now, in terms of the records then, what we're proposing to take is the undersized area that's now dedicated to staff locker space and also staff break area, and convert that to law enforcement record storage, so we get it out of the lower level, get it out of the jail perimeter down there, and then open it up so it's accessible to all the clerical staff who are right in the middle here. This is your lobby here. And if the lobby is here and the clerical staff access there, we might be able to develop a secondary window for people making records requests at that point. As far as the lower level, the north part of the lower level, this is the Sally Port down here that divides the southern half and the northern part of the building with the jail and all the cell blocks up here. What we're proposing to take is the current booking area, which is now, it's basically abandoned except for the special needs people that are holding these booking cells, and convert that to evidence, which is not only the evidence storage, but which is an evidence office, and then a processing area for patrol officers. And then what was the old medical area that's essentially abandoned except for the exam room and the nurse, turn that into found and confiscated property. The beauty of this location is that it has the big sally port for an officer to drive in, especially if they have large items of evidence to drop it off. This area, which is the old visiting area, but is easily accessible for the staff for outside access from parking, would be one part of the training operations with training offices out of the existing offices that sit up here. And again, where you see these red dashed lines, that's where there are walls that we were suggesting be demoed. On the southern part, the old work release dorm that was on the opposite side of the jail, that's where we proposed new staff lockers and showers, and then also break area, because that's principally used by patrol staff, and we're proposing this remain as the patrol center, and then additional training space over here. Okay. Now, the only part that really differs for the jail between the two options is in the northwest quadrant of the satellite, and that starts with the only proposals we're making here because of what's there and the limitations we have is the kitchen is big enough, but it's got problems, but at this stage, we're essentially suggesting it stay alone. These are your staff locker areas and break area. But the only thing we're really suggesting is that this is now program offices, and we're going to accommodate that elsewhere in the building. So we want to take that back as linen storage and to expand the laundry operation, which has to be expanded, because again, this laundry only serves the capacity of the satellite, not the capacity of the satellite plus. And the other thing is this delivery point was always too small to bring vehicles in, so we're proposing extending it so they actually can get the vehicles inside the garage. Now, on option 2, we're going to be attaching or proposing to attach the law enforcement center to it. So one of the things we want to take advantage of is to close the locker area that's here, which is inadequate for the number of staff that's at the jail now, let alone when we bring everybody to the jail, and turn that into food, dry goods storage for the kitchen, and a new commissary up here, because commissary right now is at the back of a smaller food storage area, and actually it's really vulnerable to theft because it's a very hard to observe area and the commissary is open back there. But then take the refrigerator and freezer that sit up here now, move them back where the storage was, and then gain ourselves more working room for equipment. And then with a security window here, an opportunity to see into that area where right now remote views are really cut off from this area back here. Okay. As far as jail staffing estimates, which start on page 181, remember we said we estimated at the time between 5.3, in the part 1 presentation, between 5.3 and 10.6 FTE savings, where our final calculation between adequate staffing at your current facilities versus adequate staffing at the proposed option is that the proposed options would save 7.7 FTE over current levels of adequate staffing. And that roughly translates into about $10.5 million over 20 years, assuming 2.5% annual inflation. First year savings about $410,000. Plus, the new facilities will be safer. They'll be more secure, and they'll accommodate more programs and services. So even though we have less staff, we're actually getting more out of them. Now, the calculations that come from is given, and this is our staffing guys analysis, giving existing physical plant limitations, adequate current staffing, and again, this goes back to what we reported in part 1, would be roughly 87.5 FTE. And we actually recommended that until the master plan is executed, that we actually look at increasing the staff at the two facilities. Roughly speaking, for comparison's sake, that leaves us, given the 225 average daily population we've been running over the last 4 years, about a 2.6 inmate to 1 staff ADP to staff ratio. ADP, again, being average daily population. In the future options 1 and 2, we're at 79.8 FTE for 4 more inmates. With a 307-bed facility, we figure you can run up to about 255 average daily population before the classification system begins struggling a little bit with finding a bed in the right place, so we just use that number. But that even at 255, we could go higher with that staff, and that's 3.2 to 1 ADP to inmate ratio, or roughly speaking, about 20% more efficient overall. As far as the project schedule in option 1, this is a preliminary schedule, and we know that a lot of the issues that you have to deal with can affect this. So this is just kind of a look from our point of view. We have the issue of the precast panel investigations as the first item, programming and schematics, architect selection, design, development, construction documents, bidding and negotiation, the phase 1 construction, phase 2 to renovate the satellite, phase 3 downtown renovation. And following all those bars out, we estimate that that whole process would be complete by about June 2020. Option 2, same steps minus phase 3 downtown renovation. We estimate it's complete in August 2019. So down to pros and cons, that's one of the things we were asked for early on, that there be narrative pros and cons to these things, not just prices. As far as option 1, pros, and what was it, Chuck? You made some comment that pros and cons in this case is not actually appropriate. We should have come up with different terms. But number 1, option 1 really addresses the principal jail housing needs we were trying to address, minus the single occupancy issue, the extent to which we provide it. addresses the jail program and support space needs, resolves jail security, safety, and standard shortcomings. I think a key one philosophically is it changes the character of the intake release area, more consistent with the mission statement of the Sheriff's Office, more consistent with the direct supervision philosophy. It would start there, which was recommended by ILPP, and also the current classification system. Allows for easy jail expansion, more staff-efficient jail, and addresses the critical but not all of the law enforcement, which, by the way, we're using the tag LE there, and we'll use that in the future for law enforcement space problems. The cons for option one, the law enforcement to execute the law enforcement option, we have to rent for about 15 months, and the rental space must overcome certain technology obstacles, which not all rental space will be easy to accommodate: emergency power, communications, connections. It takes 10 months longer to complete than option two. Fitting the law enforcement functions in the space is designed for other things. We're taking over jail booking areas with angles and triangles and all kinds of things and trying to adapt it to certain law enforcement needs. In our opinion, the solution there is mediocre, and it results in a segmented solution, upper level, lower level, and two halves, et cetera, that makes us call it mediocre. Future expansion is problematic, especially if the jail portion gets occupied by someone else or something else. Potentially, we're renovating, maintaining, and heating a vacated jail for a period of time. The sheriff, while he's connected now to the downtown jail, will be totally separated from jail that his office administers, and there is no room for additional parking on that site. As far as option two, the pros, they're basically the same as 1 for 6 that I already went over for option one, plus there is no need to close the downtown law enforcement center and rent, and we have a faster project. We address all of law enforcement space problems well. We provide for easy law enforcement expansion. We create shared training and staff space, and I think from a camaraderie point of view, in my experience, it's always been a very valuable thing to have your law enforcement and your jail staff basically lockering, breaking, and meeting in the same areas, as opposed to have a schism between the two, which happens in a lot of agencies when they're separated. Law enforcement's presence adds quick emergency jail backup. It's hard to put an FTE value on it. It's more of a performance and safety value. There's ample land to meet all parking needs, ample land for future consolidation of law enforcement vehicles. If we ever decide that we want to use the space where the law enforcement vehicles are stored now for other things, we have the space to bring that to the site and consolidate all law enforcement operations. It allows the option of selling the downtown and thus offsetting some of the costs of this option. The cons, we must find a user for the vacated building or find a buyer. If no buyer is found, we must bear the cost of maintenance or demolition of the space. And again, more travel for the public doing business at the courthouse and law enforcement on the same trip. We're now making them go 2 different places. But Sheriff kind of reported that he thought that was really a minimal number of people. Okay, Chuck? Here, Jim.
Okay. Why don't you give me the first one? Okay, what we attempted to do here was estimate the utility costs to operate under the various phases. Option one assumes is the highest, and it assumes that we've modified the systems, the existing systems in the satellite, to get some improved performance out of them. It assumes that the satellite addition is geothermal, which is quite high efficiency, and it assumes the downtown is modified, or how shall I say, not modified, rebuilt to more conventional systems. Now, we chose conventional systems there because we're not sure we got enough space on the ground for a geothermal solution at the downtown facility. So those numbers you see there represent those assumptions. Okay, in this option, we've got the sheriff's operation going into the satellite campus. We have the space. That's a more efficient facility, or more, we have the ability to put a geothermal system there, which is much more efficient than our conventional systems. There's some significant savings there. So when you start subtracting those numbers, that's the difference per year. One of the drawbacks to keeping the downtown facility and not using the whole thing is you have to still have the utilities to heat those spaces and keep them dry and so on and so forth. So you're really paying for something you're not using.
Also, in our part one of the study, we did facility audits and looked at things, that maintenance items that needed to be repaired. And Dennis showed a schedule that showed it was about 3 years before the satellite additions were completed, satellite jail additions were completed, which would then allow movement of inmates and/or movement out of law enforcement staff to rental space or to more permanent space at the satellite facility. So there's about a 3-year window at the downtown facility where we need to keep that facility up and running. And though we're trying to only look at the absolute minimum to invest in that building, we still think there's about $52,000 worth of repairs needed, mainly to fix roof leaks and to repair the emergency generator. The cost at the satellite facility, there are things there too that ought to be done immediately and get into your budget. One is you're going to talk about further tonight is the repair of the concrete wall panels. For the time being, in our estimates, we are using the repair methods requested in the Wist-Janney-Elstner report. So those being the only diagnosis we have of that problem, those are the costs. We assign cost to those repair items. Also, Jim would like to do some energy upgrades to that building to make it more efficient. And it is at the end of its roof life also. So the $2.4 million invested at the satellite some are routine maintenance items, others are energy fixes. And then on top of those two hard numbers at the bottom are fees and other soft costs associated with doing those projects and competitively bidding them. So about $2.7 million, in our opinion, needs to be invested over these next 3 years.
Can I say something?
Yep, sure.
There's just a couple points we ought to think about as we go through this. That $52,000 on the downtown just kind of keeps the patient on life support. And this bears some resemblance to what happened to the old nursing home when the decision was made to eventually move out of it and the investments in that stopped. If we go down this road with the $52,000 on the downtown facility, what will happen is that the deferred maintenance items will continue to increase. So if at the end of that, you want to keep it, there's just going to be that much more expense waiting for you in that building. And the other thing is just one additional item at the satellite. There's a fairly significant amount of money, like $674,000, that needs to be spent replacing the intercom and the security system, which are failing. So there's an energy component to that. There's a stabilization of the envelope so that it's not leaking water, and then there's the preserving the security feature. Those things are all wrapped up in that 2.7.
And I want to add on to what Jim's comment. The $52,000 investment at the downtown facility are for some major items that need to be repaired immediately, but there will continue to be things that break and need to be fixed during that period too that wouldn't be reflected in that $52,000. Now, for construction costs, of course, we list option 1 and 2. And the first category there is the jail expansion itself and the renovations in the existing satellite jail. The new additions and the parking areas for both scenarios, about $19,400,000. Renovations, slightly different, as Dennis pointed out in option 2, there's a little work in the northwest quadrant of the satellite facility. So another 1.7 to 1.8 million dollars there. So the subtotal for the jail construction costs are right at $21 million. The law enforcement component at the downtown facility, of course, we have the renovation costs of about $4.1 million. Cost of renting and improving temporary space. Dennis touched on this a bit. At the current moment, there would be options for you to rent space in Champaign-Urbana in a 17,000 square foot block. And we have chosen, for the purposes of this estimate, a kind of a middle of the road, in today's numbers, a middle of the road cost for renting that space. Then we've assigned $1 per square foot to improve it because we don't know whether the space we rent will be completely vacant, whether it'll have some existing partitions that need to be demolished. So again, we're trying to be conservative with that number. And then also we know there's some specialized systems for evidence storage and an emergency generator and connection to your IT network here with the county that would need to be factored into that rental cost as well. At the option one cost for satellite additions and law enforcement renovation downtown, roughly $26.8 million. In option two, where we're building that law enforcement area new at the satellite facility, we're at a total of $27.4 million there. Now, those hard construction costs, next slide, are just part of the story. There's also then soft costs on top of those numbers. Those soft costs include geotechnical surveys, land surveys, professional fees, furnitures, fixtures, equipment, utility consumption during construction, those types of things. We estimate those to be around $3.4 million in both options, and that brings a total base project cost now of roughly $30.2 to $30.8 million in today's dollars. One of the reasons we put together the schedule that we did was we know we're not ready to build today, and labor costs keep going up, construction costs keep going up. So based on historic averages of about 3% escalation per year, thinking if this project continues to move right along in a normal sequence from this point on, we'd be bidding it in about 2 years. So we've added escalation cost to 2017. And so you can see it's about $900,000 a year on a project of this magnitude. So $1.8 million of escalation costs. So our estimate today, based on bidding in 2017, is around $32.1 to $32.6 million for these improvements. Now we know we've had projects come in below our estimates, and we also know a lot about the project at this point, but not all the detail. As we continue on through the architectural phases, we learn more about the project. And so there's contingencies built in for these things that might be added, what the bidding climate might be 2 years from now. Several things we don't have a pulse on yet. So we're giving you a range tonight of option one costing about $29 million to $36.9 million, and option two, $29.4 million to $37.6 million. For all practical purposes, with contingencies factored in, these two options cost about the same. So in summary, given the long-term, the objectives, we believe we've developed two long-term solutions that meet those objectives: safer space, more responsive to staff and community needs, more efficient, and more compliant with standards. There's really very little cost difference between the two options when it all comes down to the bottom line. As Jim pointed out earlier, option two saves about $1 million in utility costs over a 20-year period. Option two really would work a little more seamlessly. There's no renting. It can be done faster. Option two, there's more ability, more flexibility, more expandability in the future. There's more space out the satellite facility to get that done. We feel, as Dennis pointed out, there were few interior renovations to the physical space at the downtown facility for law enforcement, and that was constructed in 1980. So really the sheriff is operating out of space that's now designed for an operation 35 years ago, and that remains the same in our current scenario. So he could have far more efficient space at the satellite facility that would meet today's needs better. And consolidating everything at the satellite facility, law enforcement can provide quicker emergency backup if required at the jail. So as a consulting team, asked to make a recommendation, we'd recommend option two to the Facilities Committee and the County Board. Okay. So next steps for you and the board, we know what's on your agenda next is testing those exterior concrete wall panels. We think that's an important step. We're using professional judgment and previous experience to come up with the areas we've come up for this report, but a more detailed space programming effort would need to follow. And then schematic design and the typical architectural phases so that we can more closely estimate costs, inflation, timelines, and challenges and those types of things. That's where we are. We appreciate it. Ready for questions?
Thank you. Do any of the committee members have specific questions? Mr. Quisenberry?
Yeah, I actually have a number of questions, but since I understand that we're going to have a study session with regard to this for the full board this month, potentially, I'll leave some of the questions that are less facilities related and more maybe programmatically related to that time. My first question is, you noted a number of potential energy efficiencies that would be added. In the end result, would option one or option two rate somewhere on, I'm not suggesting we go for LEED certification, but would it approach any of those levels of certification?
Let me rephrase the questions.
Sure.
And if I don't say it right, then ask it over again. Anything that's new that we're going in with proposed geothermal would very much approach those levels of certification. It will be harder to achieve that with the existing systems at either the satellite or the downtown facility. The satellite, in particular, we're proposing some energy efficiency activities, modifications, if you will, that may very well qualify for some significant incentive dollars from DCEO to help to partially offset those costs.
Okay, does that include any of like the heat recovery wheel technology, or is it?
We would propose, matter of fact, we've definitely proposed that in both the new sheriff's facility and the additions to the satellite. It's a little bit harder to do to
Okay.
the existing satellite, just
Right.
because of the way it is.
The envelope and such?
Yes.
Okay.
The geometry problem.
Okay. You mentioned also in some of the renovation of the visitation area in the satellite facility that some space could be utilized for family contact visits, but it sounded like when we were done, that wouldn't be the case. It sounded like a future option. Can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a concept we discussed, but I think it's not one, it's one that needs more study because there's a lot of implications of, contraband issues related to have the families in there and checking them out and that sort of thing. But we wanted to make sure that we either had a large space for activities that were there or family contact. But at this point, I guess programmatically, it's still yet to be determined.
Okay.
Discussions in terms of how it would work and whether it would work adequately from a security point of view.
Yeah, I do appreciate the information that you've provided on the efficiency, the savings, the FTE impact. One thing I didn't get a clear idea on was between options 1 and 2, whether there is an additional value to that. I suspect that there's not like FTE savings, but the efficiency of having the sheriff's operation all in one place versus the additional cost of having to go back and forth with the courthouse, which they don't have. Was that
Yeah,
reviewed?
it's really a good question, and I'll tell you, it's one that we struggled with, because I put that question to our staff consultant a couple of times, and his attitude about it, or his response to it was that it's hard to quantify. It's hard to boil it down that it saves 0.2 FTE or 0.5 or something like that.
Okay.
Because the fundamental value to the jail is in emergency response, and that's periodic. I mean, it could be 10 times in a year, it could be 1 time in a year. So therefore, it's hard to put it on it. But what we know, there is a qualitative advantage that if if all heck breaks loose at the jail, we have a certain number of law enforcement staff right there that can come in and help the operation. So he perceived it more as a qualitative thing than as something that he could quantify as a savings. I think from the sheriff's point of view, I think, again, it's probably qualitative because he's right there with all his senior management. If he wants, he can walk over to the jail and see what's going on and be part of critical decision-making. So I guess I would put it more in the qualitative benefit category than quantifiable category.
Okay,
I don't know if, if any of them would differ on that, but,
all right.
yeah.
Not clear enough to write down, is what I'm
Yes.
hearing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Believe me, I pressed him.
Okay.
I kept saying, there has to be a number, and he says, no, I can't give you a number on that.
And the other thing, as far as, blocks on the diagram, I noted a pretty significant amount of space for what was labeled in-service training. I guess I'm a little bit curious, in a community like we're in with PTI and ILEAS and a number of law enforcement groups, like in the immediate area, should we be building that space, or should we be leveraging the training that's already available locally?
I think they do that to the degree they can now, but in terms of, more focused training on issues particular to their staff that aren't necessarily offered by others, I think that's where a lot of the training comes in. It also comes in, I think, with the frequency and availability with which they can do their own training. So for example, take a topic that's in the news like taser training. If they get into that, they can run their own program with respect to that and not wait for it to be delivered by somebody somewhere else.
I guess I would see that as more of a nice to have than an absolute need, given the resources that may be available in the community. But we can
Yeah.
talk about that more in the study session. And I guess for nuts and bolts on some of these numbers here, I'm kind of curious why when you go in over the additional project costs in option 1 and option 2, I guess I'm a little surprised that option 1 is slightly more expensive than option 2, since option 2 actually results in a lot more like fresh construction.
So, which, these additional project costs?
Yeah, the 3.478 versus the $3.419 million cost.
Yeah,
When
Yeah.
we're putting a whole new sheriff's operation facility northwest of the jail.
yeah, typically, design fees are higher for a renovation project.
Okay,
And that's probably where that difference is in that big number there.
all right. And then I'm also curious, the 3-year maintenance repair numbers, it looks like those are under option 1, but I would assume those are in either case.
Yeah, they're really in either case. However, if you were going to commit to staying downtown with the sheriff's operations, you'd probably you wouldn't patch the roof, you'd replace it. So, there'd be some trade-offs.
Then the number would be bigger, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would, but it would be, it's already
But
in
it's
that.
transferred up to above the line there,
Yes,
okay.
right, yeah.
All right, those are my questions that are more focused on the actual proposal and the facilities item, so I'll yield to someone else for a bit.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kibler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have 3 questions. Hopefully, they're very quick. Number 1, looking on slide 20, where we're looking at the jail admin storage area, I noticed that the actual, this is me nitpicking, I apologize, that the actual door to the storage area goes into a secure area, whereas jail administration does not have such a door. So is it just a mal-placed thing, or is that common trend to put the door of the storage going to an area where I would assume inmates would be walking in and out and stuff like that?
here?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be better off next to jail administration or going into jail administration as opposed
Well,
to?
this would be the route that supplies would come from storage to get back into the body of the building. So that's why that route and that door is there.
Okay.
Because the cell blocks and all that are here, and then the addition would be out this way to the right side as well. So this is basically to create that path to get that stuff out there.
So when you say storage, you don't mean storage for the administration, you mean
Oh, no,
storage for
yeah,
the
I'm
inmates?
sorry. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like supply boxes of toilet paper, linen, new linens, hunks, things like that.
Okay, thank you for that. Secondly, I echo Mr. Quisenberry's note about family visiting. I think that's absolutely critical to have that one-on-one interaction, especially with kids, that no fault of their own, that a parent or a loved one is there. So I think anything we do from a a renovation point of view has to keep into account families. So anything we can do to adjust or make that a priority, I would personally like to see that happen. And then the third question is on slide 15. I noticed that the overall breakout of the new pods, if you will, isn't really broken out. And one of the concerns we had with the current jail is line of sight and what that does for staffing and adding more staff because we lose line of sight. These particular structures or shapes right now don't seem to lend themselves to good line of sight. It also seems to increase overall staffing. Can you describe a little bit more about how these will actually be laid out and how staffing will be impacted?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay? Yeah, that's a great question. The way to look at these is the assumption that all the sleeping areas, whether they be detention rooms or whatever, ring the perimeter. And any wall that subdivides the units would be very much like the walls in pods A and B, as an example. They would all access on a central point. And then the officer post would be here and thus have, direct clean lines of sight of all those areas. And then probably in this area of it is where you would find, in fact, I didn't make a point of this, but there is a note certainly in the document. In order to keep the staff more efficient, unlike the existing pods, we're going to have, every one of them is going to have an exercise component. It's going to have a sick call component. It's going to have a program/counseling room component, janitor closet, supply storage, staff toilet. There's going to be a variety of small support things that basically allow these to run as much as possible in a self-contained manner. In other words, the pod officer who will be there will be the same one that will watch visiting, exercise, sick call, and everything else. And that's one of the core problems, if you remember, that we talked about with the downtown facility, is the 2 pods you have there don't have anything else other than cells and day rooms. So if you have to go to exercise, you have to leave, and there has to be another officer called on duty to watch exercise. If you go visit, you have to leave, and another officer has to escort you and watch you visit or monitor the visit. So all of the assumption about all of these is that the sleeping areas essentially will ring the perimeter. We'll have that center control post, and we'll have those support elements as part of it. Oops, I'm doing that badly. I'm going to eat this, I guess. All right.
Any other questions from the committee?
What is the
James.
number on the women's facility there for capacity?
64.
So-
64.
So if our peak inmate population for women is 31, why would it be twice the size of what our peak has ever been?
Yeah, it's called a female-male pod, and that goes to the fact that because the female numbers are small, and we want staff efficiency, if we made a 32-bed pod, we'd have a poor staff-to-inmate ratio. So we came up with the idea of a pod that'd be entered from 2 points, and that there'd be a series of units with changeable barriers. So the females would come in one side, and they'd occupy as much as they needed to at a given time. Males would come in on the other side, and there would be sound and view separation and blockage from those areas. And if there were fewer females and we had more males, then we could take a small unit and say that's no longer a female unit, it now can be used by a male population. And if this happens over time, where that female population goes from 32 to 40 to 48, they can continue moving on until they eventually occupy that whole pod. So it'd be a very cute design, but it'd be one that's intended to solve the problem you're talking about, but fundamentally maintain a good staff-to-inmate ratio.
Okay.
At least that's the starter concept. We're not, the next stage of the programming is really meant to flesh out those details and debate those details. So now it's at the conceptual stage. The next stage really says, well, how would that exactly work?
Okay. And there's been a lot of talk lately, I'll say momentum, towards what I think some people are calling an adult assessment center as a way of meeting needs for mental health as opposed to incarceration. I'm assuming that all of your projections here, particularly about the special need area, did not take any of that potential impact into account.
No, the only thing that we took into account is that we discussed the nature of the housing units and how they might be flexible enough by design to accommodate different populations if something like that were to occur. And again, you know, as I stated earlier, from my point of view, you know, if the population falls, and as a consequence of that, we're able to take more multiple occupancy housing out of action and turn that into single occupancy housing, which I think is really the best operational way to go, then I'd say that's a virtue of a falling population. If you follow what I mean.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, James. Any other questions from the committee? Yes.
One, if I might. Actually, I got a lot more. I just need time to go over what I heard. I did read what was given earlier, and then I listened to the presentation. Visiting, face-to-face visiting, I don't see any increase in that. You are increasing or recommending the increase of video visitation, but not face-to-face.
Yeah, there's let's see, I need to point at that here. This is the, what you would call the face-to-face or non-contact. In other words, a person sits here and the inmate sits here. There's more on the other side as well. So you're right, at this point, we're not proposing any more of that because a lot of the visiting count now is taken up by the video. So we're actually increasing the amount of visiting that's going on, but we're principally doing it in the video area and then in the contact area down here.
The reason I ask is we were there this evening on the tour, and I believe every seat on both sides with in-person visiting, if you will, the face-to-face were occupied. And if we're looking at the proposal of adding 80 more inmates into the facility, or, you know, it depends what growth happens, then that may serve to be inadequate. And while you might look at the space you provided down below as a method of dealing with that.
And I hate to give a similar sort of answer, so I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but I think right now at the conceptual stage we thought it would work. But when we get to that next stage of programming, there would be a much more prolonged discussion about numbers and how the numbers are going to work, how we portion out the visiting between pods or segments of pods. There's a lot of detailed stuff, and it may be in the programming phase that we come back and conclude where I think you're leading is that maybe we need more of that kind.
Maybe, because I see the sheriff incurring potentially more costs because he's paying someone now to receive these visitors and send them. And the only way to deal with the extra population would be longer hours of visiting, more hours of visiting.
Yeah, visiting is one of those
There's not
things that you
space
can,
available to
you can solve
accommodate.
some of that by extending hours, correct?
Yeah.
Laundry's sort of like that in that you could extend shifts. You know, it just depends on how much you want to use your equipment.
Right. That's it for now.
Thank you. Mr. Kibler.
I do have one follow-on question along the lines of using video conferencing. I see the ones that are accessible by the public. Where are the video conferencing equipment for those?
Yeah, great question. I didn't mention that before. That's going to be part of that new pre-classification 0 to 72-hour pod because most of the people who will use the video equipment will be housed in that area. And then, I mean, the concept we had is it would be part of that pod, but also accessible from the general corridor. So if you're you just come in, but you're classified maximum right away because of past behavior or how you behaved at intake or whatever, you still have access to that video appearance space. But we figured the greatest number would be in that pre-classification 0 to 72-hour pod. So that is actually part of that pod concept and part of that square footage allocation. And by the way, from a staff efficiency point of view, the concept is the officer that is managing the detainees in that pod will also have direct line of sight of that video appearance area. So basically, you don't have to add another officer to get that job done either.
May I? Are you two talking about two different things? You're maybe talking video arraignment, and are you talking inmate visitation with the family electronically?
I'm asking about inmate visitation.
Oh, I'm
with
sorry.
That's
family.
what I thought. You're talking.
Well, you're getting two for here. You get two
Awesome.
answers. All right. Yeah, the video visitation is one of the things that's going to be focused at the pods. That's part of it. So, for example, if the family member comes and uses that space there, they'll be talking to the inmate in the pods. That's kind of what happens now because they've mounted video visiting stations in the cell blocks themselves. we're going to extend that concept, although we're going to create space for that. Because, one of the observations we made is that it's nice that the video visiting units are in the day rooms of the downtown facility satellite. But because they're in the day rooms, while they're convenient, there's also no privacy involved. You're essentially visiting in front of your fellow inmates, and acoustically, you're trying to talk while the television's going on, guys showering, doors are opening and slamming, people moving around, whatever the case may be. So our goal insofar as the new pods is to fix that by creating private, or, acoustically private visiting space.
Pius, please.
Thank you. My question has to do with the option one, the cost of renting and improving temporary space. Have you looked into, you don't have to bring up a slide. Have you looked into renting cells at other jails outside of the county? Because at times in the past, we've shipped people off. Usually they charge a flat fee. Of course, then you have to transportation costs, vehicle costs, things like that, and time for people to drive and pick those people up. Did you look into that option? Because it looks like we have like 25 to 50 people roughly per day in the downtown jail.
Yeah, we averaged 25 for the first 4 months, I think, of this year, and then we actually, I don't know where we've been since, but in September we peaked up around 74. We estimated in the part one part of the study, and it was part of the part one report, that an average daily population of about 45 would be shipped to other jurisdictions. And if I have my numbers right, it would cost us in per diems, not counting transportation cost, assuming a cost like $70 a day. We assumed 70 because we knew Kankakee County had beds available and could take that kind of number at about 1.15 million for a year's worth of renting space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Mr. Quisenberry.
This isn't really a question, but I feel like it needs to be stated. I do understand what we asked for and what we received here, but I'm concerned that not only does this proposal exceed our capability to fund, given what I currently know, it also may. I'm also sure it exceeds the capacity of some of the public to support as a way to spend our dollars. So I looked through it pretty carefully, and I didn't find a way. You hear the Cadillac versus Chevy analogy. What I see here is more like a Lexus, and I don't see the ability to either trim it down based on what we want to expect with regard to reduced incarceration, or trim it down to what we can afford. So I think we've been put in a pretty difficult position as a board to take this information and move forward with it. I hope we can do so. I mean, we have no choice. This is an operation that we have to house and that we have to fund one way or another. But I feel like that's the elephant in the room, and if nobody else is going to say it, I'm going to say it.
Thank you, James. Any other comments, questions? If not, I will thank the presenters for their program this evening. And a little later in the program, we will deal with what I expect that we would do to go forward. And so if there are no other comments from you or questions from the committee, then I would suggest that we move on to the next item in the agenda. Thank you. That brings up a good question. We've been at this now for an hour and a half. Is there an inclination on the part of the committee to take a break for about 10 minutes?
I think there's already been one vote for that.
I'm prepared to move on unless you all want to do it. All right, we will keep on going. The next item is a presentation from Deb and Van concerning an update on the U.S. Department of Justice ADA compliance audit for Champaign County. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I don't know how I'm getting ahead of myself tonight. All right, thank you for the point of order. All right, the next one would be to direct the county administration staff to proceed with the concrete panel investigation at the satellite jail. Would like a motion directing the administrative staff to proceed with the investigation of the concrete panel at the jail.
So moved.
Mr. Kibler,
Second.
Mr. Quisenberry, all in favor?
Can we have some discussion?
All right, I'm sorry, discussion. All right, any comments, discussion? Please, Mr. Quisenberry.
I was going to say, Dana, do you have any points to share on this? I didn't go on the tour, so I may have missed some.
You missed a tour, but were you there last spring when we walked around the exterior? So you've seen the cracks along the pre-stressed strands as well as in corners of the building on each of the panels. So basically every panel that touches the ground and the foundation has some cracking within it. We really need to determine. We did have two expert engineers give us two varying opinions, one from each side of the fence, so to speak. We have asked our experts to, working on the master plan, to give us their best thoughts, and we really feel that we've got to do something to investigate why we believe it's water is infiltrating each of the panels and causing the pre-stressed strands to corrode and to put pressure on the concrete to crack. We don't know about the connection between each of the panels and the foundation, which is one of the things we'd like to look at. And as you do that, you can have gauge a very good idea about, you're going to have to dig down to the foundation. Is there standing water at times of the year? You'll see discoloration, calcification of the concrete, et cetera, as you're digging down. This study would examine probably 3 panels at the engineer's choice. We'll use a combination of entities' efforts. Besides the engineer, County Highway will assist with the backhoe. Our facility plant maintenance folks will provide laborers. We'll have a roofing expert, because besides digging out to the foundation, want to expose several connection points at the roof level, which will then have to be closed back up. Concrete expert to do a core saw of 3 panels, plus then chipping out the concrete so that we can see the connection points adequately, plus then filling them back in to make sure that they're watertight. So we really believe that this is a must for us moving forward, whether we move forward with any plan in the future, and just maintaining the facility at a high level to make sure that it's stable, watertight.
Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Kibler?
So I have a question on cost. I know that in this particular scope of services, the fee calculation's at 24/7. That being said, that we're going to be providing, the county will provide, the laborers, the people who looking at the roof and so forth. What is the added cost? Is that going to impact the other, the facilities group or the highway department? Because I know that's highway equipment. So what is the impact and cost in those dollars? What are we going to be losing without having those laborers for this period of time?
Well, it is a short period of time. We have not calculated those costs because they're, to a certain extent, unknown. How much will the roofer cost? We have not priced that out. We have not signed up with any particular engineering firm. We do certainly have a price estimate, which was given in the document. But some of those costs are just unknown at this time. Certainly, it'll be minimal to county highway. Digging out will be no more than maybe a half a day with a backhoe and our people. Obviously, at the end, you got to fill it in, so maybe it's a total day. But we share opportunities to assist each other whenever possible. So
Thank you. To add on to that, so the roofer part of this, because that is still an unknown, that is not something that's going to be brought in by the county, correct? That is not an in-house person today?
No.
So can the project be completed without such a person? Like, are we doing this in multi-phases, one with this particular set, the engineering expertise, and then we're going to be adding a roofing piece of this later?
I think our goal would be to do this all at once, so it would have to be staged and arranged. We'll have to be, watching Mother Nature and our temperatures. If we dig down to the foundation, we really need to only have that foundation exposed for a day or two. If it's done here in late winter, early spring, to make sure that temperatures at night aren't causing us a problem with the foundation. And with the roof, if we're going to expose several pieces in some small areas, we need to be able to make it watertight at the end of the night. But by the time this is over, I would hope that it's only a day or two to do this investigation.
Sure, and the reason I bring that up is in the recommended action, and I'm going to call on Van or Deb on this, it actually explicitly states TSI Advanced Roofing and gives a company name and so forth, but that's not part of this pricing structure. So what is the status of a roofer? Is there one, and what is the cost of one? If we haven't identified it, is this specific company in mind? That sort of thing.
Well, and actually Dana can answer that.
Okay. We have used, for this particular roof, we have used TSI. They actually installed the roof, but they've been out numerous times. The building's 18 years old. The roof is membrane. It's a ballasted roof with rocks on top. It's a EPDM black rubber roof that's attached to the sides with protection over the top of the precast. They've been out there multiple times. It would be, the local company who I would certainly use because of their experience and knowledge of this roof. We're not talking a great deal of dollars here. I can't give you it because I've not talked to them about it at this point in time, but when we call them to come out and do repairs, it's a few hundred here, it's, 500 or 600 there, depending upon the extent of the roof that you're opening up. This is not a large area by any stretch of the imagination.
I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on. So in this case, we've got 3 or 4 different sets of people who we're trying to get through with this motion, but we don't really, and I'm not saying we have to have all this concrete information, but I want to make sure I understand that we are giving authority, actually, we're passing it to the full board to give authority for us to hire ERA, a concrete contractor, a TSI Advanced Roofing person, as well as the usage of our own highway and county facility people at this point.
A lot of this can be done under Dana's authority for maintenance. The total project, when we brought it to the board last August, was no more, or not to exceed $44,000. And now we've parsed that down to the different component parts, and Dana's managing the project and to keep the cost down. And so all of this can be done actually under his authority. It's already in the budget for this project, and so that's why it's being brought to you in this manner.
Okay, thank you.
As I understand, we're just giving him the authority to proceed. And I believe we have a motion, and we have a second. Mr. Quisenberry.
This isn't going to go on to the full board, correct? We're going to do this here and it's done.
That's correct.
So Jeff, make sure you know that's what you're voting for.
Are we ready for the question? I want the committee members to be comfortable with this. Again, thank you, Mr. Kibler.
Sorry, I have to make sure that this is something I can explain to somebody else. So we're giving authority at this point for, right now, $24,000 not to exceed calculation for one piece of four. Really, two pieces of four, because I'm going to assume the county and the highway facilities are under our umbrella. But the other two items, we're giving approval for things that we don't know the price to. And that bothers me, that we don't know what those prices are, given in this specific motion, given that the prior motions, prior discussions were done in a prior board in a different committee. So do we have anything that we can be a little bit more concrete on with respect to roofing, with respect to the other costs in this motion?
Okay. We don't have dollar values, as Dana explained. If the roofing component that will be done, if there was a leak tomorrow, Dana could proceed based on dollar cost that we're expecting. And again, based on the estimates that were provided last August is how we're proceeding. But all of those numbers that we're looking at for the concrete contractor, the roofing contractor, would be in the facilities director's authority to have that work done. And so you're approving that we go forward with the work with one specific piece shown here, understanding that the other pieces are within the authority of the facilities director to engage those contractors.
Clarification, if you don't mind. So in the normal role, Mr. Brenner would be able to go and hire somebody to go fix a roof without our approval. I think that's what you're stating at the beginning, under a certain dollar amount. But at this point, we're giving a vote to give him approval to do basically his normal day in and day out job, which seems to me is indicating that we're giving approval for things above what he normally would be able to do without our approval. So why ask if that's why ask us for the money if it's not going to be above that certain dollar amount in this case? Because I feel like we're giving, why I'm concerned, I feel like we're giving approval for something that we don't know. Why are we giving approval for something that we don't know the dollar amount to when the reasoning is that we should be able to pay for it without board approval anyways?
If I could just try and explain this from maybe a little bit different perspective. We have in the capital project budget for facilities this year, the sealing and fixing of the joints and cracks in the walls at the satellite facility. You had competing reports from architects last year about whether or not to further investigate the source or the potential cause of some of those cracks. What you're really doing tonight, I believe, is directing that we proceed with that forensic investigation of the cracks, which is what this contract with ERA will accomplish. And that's really the direction that you're providing. When the estimate that was provided last year for this project was, for the forensic investigation, was in about the $40,000 range. We're bringing you, but that was having ERA do all of the work. What we're bringing to you is we only want ERA to do the architectural or engineering side of the work, and we will make arrangements for the rest of the work to be completed in concert with them. We will get quotes for the roof work if we need to. We will follow the purchasing policy, and we will work within the budget that's been established in the capital fund for this year for the project, which is the satellite jail, the structural issues with the satellite jail. So what I think you're doing is approving going ahead with this forensic investigation rather than just proceeding with the satellite jail cracks and joints and not ever doing the forensic investigation.
All right, any other comments or discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. At this point, we will move on to item 9, the U.S. Department of Justice ADA compliance audit for Champaign County, and I appreciate an update from Ms. Busey and Mr. Anderson.
I'm going to start this and Van's going to finish it because Van wasn't here when this started. In June of 2011, we were contacted, and many of you will remember this, by the U.S. Department of Justice, indicating that we had been randomly selected to have an ADA compliance audit done on all of our facilities. We shared a lot of information with the Department of Justice over the summer of 2011, and in September of 2011, the Department of Justice brought a team of architects, investigators, and interns to the county, and they spent a week going through all of our facilities, conducting an ADA compliance audit of all of our facilities. I heard from them in late December of 2014, and actually we were in contact with them in January, just in the last month. With regard to their audit, they provided findings to us at that time, which are preliminary, subject to our review. And because Van has been extremely involved in this type of compliance work in his role with the University of Illinois, he has taken the lead on this project, and I'm going to let him explain to you how we are proceeding at this time.
So this is just the very front end of this work. What we received from the U.S. Department of Justice was over 200 pages of information on their findings and a proposed agreement. What you have in front of you tonight in this sheet, if you open it up, you see a spreadsheet that was developed. The county is a unique entity from the standpoint that with the elected officials, we have to have much more involvement of the units across the board in determining policies and procedures and how they're going to accommodate people with disabilities in their office environments. And so what we have done to start out with, you see across the top, this is called the remedial action assignments and document distribution. And so as you look down the left-hand column, you see there's a settlement agreement, and then below that is A through P. Those are the sections of that agreement. And so within each of those sections are multiple things that have to be addressed. But what we have done preliminarily, and this will be our first meeting with the elected officials and department heads will be in the morning. And so that they'll see this, and we'll start parsing out the information that they have to address and fold back into this work. And so what you see here, every place that there's an X, across for the units and then down for the settlement agreement parts, that's who's responsible or has to be a part of determining what we're going to do for this compliance effort. And so down below the solid black line in the middle where it starts out attachment A through attachment O, those are attachments to the proposed agreement, and that just tells you who gets what documents. And so again, this is just very preliminary, and one of the things you'll see is for instance, the MetCat operation, you have the light blue highlighting that's showing the 911. And at the bottom of the page, you see the city of Champaign is really the lead agency for MetCAD, and so therefore, they're responsible for the operations of the 911 facility. We're responsible for the facility issues, and if there's any issues with accessibility to the facility from a physical standpoint, we're responsible. But what they have put in this proposed compliance agreement is really the operations and how you deal with people calling into the facility who may have hearing disability. And so it actually talks about the training for the operators. It talks about the equipment that has to be handled. And so that actually will be sent over to MetCAD for that. But for the rest of these things, these are all within the county. It's dealing with everything from your parking lots to your doorways into your buildings, to how much force it takes to open the doors at the facilities, the types of handles on doors in the facilities. But a lot of it also has to deal with how do we interact with the public. So are they able to get into our facility? But then how do we treat someone that maybe has a vision disability, hearing disability? And we have to, and they've lined out the elements that we have to, with which we have to comply, and the things that they feel that we're deficient in. And again, this is after we meet with all of these groups and we determine how we feel we need to address these compliance, what they consider compliance deficiencies. There may be cases where we don't have a deficiency, or we feel we don't have a deficiency, so we'll have to develop a response for that. But there will also be some things that have changed in the last 3.5 years. And so some of those issues may go away. We may have other facility issues that we have to investigate because of the way some of the wording is in the document. There will be things like an independent licensed architect that we're going to have to hire to certify compliance in the areas that they've identified for the building type issues. And so this is going to be a very intensive project. We will be bringing this back to you once we have put together a response to the U.S. Department of Justice, and after we have a better idea of exactly what this is going to entail. We already have, Dana's already done some walkthroughs of some of the buildings to look at some of the issues they've identified, so we can start getting an idea of where we're going to have to put efforts. We'll also start attaching some of the dollar cost to this. There will have to be coordination between administrative services, the department heads, the elected officials, for things like, ADA coordinator or coordinators, depending on what the office needs are. And so, again, this is a very preliminary look, but it's something that the U.S. Department of Justice is going to expect quick action on. We will meet with them via teleconference next week. And so we will be presenting back to them what we've done to date, and also putting questions on the table for them that come up in the session tomorrow and that come up from, some of the walkthroughs that Dana's done and some of the things that we've seen in the document. And so we'll be coming back to you when we have a response for the U.S. Department of Justice.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? If not, it appears we have much work to do in that area. I'm sorry.
What kind of timeline do they have for a response and compliance to especially some of the bigger things we might have to do?
It depends on what the issue is. There are hundreds and hundreds of items that we have identified that are out of their document. Some of them you have to have a 1 month time frame to abate. Some of them have 2 months, some 3 months, and it stretches out to 30 months for some of the longest. And then there's some annual reporting requirements that are going to be part of this project as well. And there's some of them that are listed as necessary. So if it's something that does pertain to the county, action will have to be taken immediately in those cases.
Thank you. Did John? Any other comments or questions from the committee on ADA? How much time's left? All right. Item 10 has been moved down below, so we will move to, let's see, item 11, and that's approval to bid the courthouse window replacement project. like a motion to, motion to allow, to direct the facilities director to seek bids, prepare a bid specification, seek bids for the replacement of certain courthouse windows. And
So moved.
Mr. Kibler? Mr. Rosales, discussion, report from Dana, please.
The proposal is concerning the original courthouse windows. They are not original to the courthouse, fortunately. They were installed in 1986. They are a single, double pane, no thermal protection, in the frame at all. There's 226 openings within the courthouse. There's probably about 35 different sizes, shapes of those openings, so they're not all the same. Many of them are unique. Several of them, more than several, there's about 10 of them that severely leak during rain events. There's about 52 or 3, if my memory is correct, where there's no more seal. They've fogged up extensively in some of the windows. You don't need a shade because you can't see out the window. But they allow whatever the temperature may be in the extremes to come in. So they're not very efficient for the building and are unsightly. This project would propose replacing with a low E glass thermal frame. The frames and windows would match the addition that was put on a few years back, 2002. The glass would all be the same size, as Patsy pointed out the other day in a meeting. Some of the frames will vary in size because, again, those openings vary greatly from one to another. So you will see a bit of a difference when comparing window to window, particularly in the old courthouse. But if you step back and look at it more as a larger picture, they should blend nicely with the existing windows from the addition versus what they are now. The window frames are very tarnished looking, very tired looking, and in a lot of cases are not holding water out or Mother Nature.
I would like to point out that you all received a proposed bid schedule. This will have to come back to the committee for action, probably in April. So we'll have an opportunity to look at it then, and then we'll have to go to the full board for award. So this is the start of it, and I will call for the vote on the motion if there are no other comments. Patsy, please.
Dana, have you done any rough calculation as to what you are anticipating the amount of the bid might be?
Rough calculation, talking with several vendors, it's going to be in, depending upon the bid and the time that we get our bids out, probably that, 180 to 210 range somehow, somewhere.
Ms. Busey.
And I would just point out that there is $215,000 budgeted for this project in the fiscal year 2015 budget in the court's construction fund, and that was included in the budget documentation that you received.
Thank you. Other questions? I'll call a question. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? None opposed, so the question carried. Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the facility director's report, please.
Got 3 quick topics, won't take too long. The first one is an update on our Brookins Administrative Center Mechanical Controls Project. At the last facilities meeting in January, we shared with you that Alpha Controls was hired to put in digital controls in pods 200, 300, and 400. That work was about 99% complete. Reminder, the total project was 139,000 and some change, and we were pre-approved with the DCEO for grant opportunity at 120,000 and some change. As of this afternoon, actually, we got the contractor back out and he installed the last piece, which was a actuator valve, pneumatic actuator valve for the last multi-zone that's in the basement here. Was installed and programmed, so we are 100% up and running. I'll get with Van maybe tomorrow or Thursday, depending upon his schedule, and we'll get the paperwork completed and then sent in to DCEO so that the funding should be received back to us in a short period of time. So we finally have completed that project. Any questions? Second item is just an update on the IT services generator project. We are very rapidly coming to a complete closure. Again, I would say we're at 99%. All the physical work has been done except one piece. Tomorrow morning at 6:30, we're having a brief scheduled power outage that'll only impact IT services, which are located in pod 400. And in the RPC, which is in pod 100, their computers as well. It'll be about a 15 to 20 minute outage that will enable our electrician to hook up the UPS battery backups to the servers so that they're fully protected for the future and obviously with our generator. Once completed tomorrow morning, we are 100% done. We'll be reviewing all the punch list has been completed, and we will sit down with the engineer, GHR, who is hired to monitor. We've already got a preliminary invoice, which everything looks fine and dandy, but we'll sit down one more time, and I expect Barbara Diatley, who is a contractor, to deliver the invoice to us sometime next week. Yeah. And the third item, which we moved earlier in the meeting, was a standalone to underneath our report. This is the courthouse LED lighting replacement. Within the courthouse, particularly as you enter the main entrance, if you remember what it looks like, there are a number of what I would call decorative T8 fluorescent tube lights that were put in to accentuate the artistic portions of the architecture of the building, and they also reside on the first floor by Katie Blakeman's area as you come up the grand staircase, as well as in front of both the second and third floor courtrooms with some very nice ceiling work. There's 510 T8 fluorescent tubes, which are very efficient to today's standards, but they're in places that it requires a 12-foot to 16-foot ladder on the first floor, second, and third floors. But in addition, there's about 120 bulbs that require the rental of a scissor lift to get to. Not to mention that these areas also collect major amounts of dust and dirt. About 75% of these fixtures that I've described are burnt out at this point in time, and I suspect they haven't been replaced just because they're in a very difficult position to get to. They have to be done in off hours. I've not talked to anyone else, but that's my Dana Brunner's quick assessment of why they've not been done. So this project that we're pursuing is to replace those 510 bulbs, those fixtures, and it's not all of them certainly in the courthouse for the addition, but replace those that are at that very extreme height and difficult to get to with LED bulbs. These LED bulbs are guaranteed for a much longer period of time. They have a lifespan anticipated of 15 to 20 years. The overall cost of purchasing these 510 is $12,831. There is some return. We anticipate about a $2,600 return on our investment in energy savings per year. So if you take the original cost and factor that return back, in about 56 months, we actually pay for the cost of these bulbs, and yet they'll keep going for easily another 15 years or so. Over the term of about 20 years, minus the cost of the expenditure for the bulbs, we're looking at about a $40,000 overall savings in electric usage for the courthouse. So we think it's a win. We think it's a positive step in the right direction for our electric use. We also, from a management standpoint and taking care of it, these will be in place for a significant period of time, not necessary to go up and replace every 2 or 3 years. The bulbs themselves can be put into a T8 fixture and run off the T8 ballast. There may be some ballast that need to be replaced as we look at all of these fixtures, but that's something we would handle out of our normal R&M budget, which is also where we're going to be handling the purchase of these LED fixtures out of our courthouse repair and maintenance budget.
Okay, Mr. Quisenberry, please.
So Dana, a couple questions. Running these LEDs through the existing T8 fixture, does that extend the life of the expected life of the ballast? Or will we be replacing the ballasts before we replace the bulbs?
No, it runs off the ballast, but it extends the life of
Because
it
the power,
tremendously,
it's
the
like
power-
10%?
Oh, if that, I mean, it's significant.
And does that mean that now the regularly scheduled use of these ladders will be about cleaning these places as opposed to replacing bulbs?
Yes.
You said that 3/4 of them are currently burnt out?
Correct. About 360 of the 510 are burnt out.
So that kind of begs the question of how necessary they are to the effect of the space, how it looks. Have
Well,
we-
it doesn't look very good right now.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you could make a decision just to disconnect everything.
Or could we put half of them in as LEDs and?
The way the space was designed and the way the lighting effect, if you went every other one, it's going to look odd.
You understand why I'm asking, right?
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. I didn't design the building. If a light bulb is burnt out, it's, be prudent to replace it so that it, fulfills the architectural design of the building and provide the adequate lighting. It is a little dark inside the, the big
So it's
open
part of the
space.
ambient light as well as
Oh, yes. Yeah.
the
It's
aesthetic
bounced
of the
off-
situation.
It's bounced off the ceiling. There are, some big globe, half globe dome lights that are on the ceiling, but those aren't supplying all of the light.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dana. I don't believe we need to do any further action on item 12C. I will move on to item 13, other business. Mr. Quisenberry.
I'm going to ask if this seating arrangement tonight was specifically for the presentation that we have or had, or if it's an experiment about future arrangements, and if it's an experiment, I would suggest we not use it in the future. Thank you.
I fully agree. I'll move on to the chair's report, which is item 14, and I promise to be brief. Future meeting of the committee is Tuesday, March the 3rd, 6:30. We will have a tour of the Emergency Management Agency, which used to be the old county office building and used to have the highway department in it many years ago. It's over on 1905 East Main. Pardon? Okay. We'll meet here at 5:15 and go over there. Just briefly, we'll touch on the discussion of the strategic plan. I think we will put that on a back burner until until the overall strategic plan for the county is further down the road. I did want to talk a little bit about the sheriff's Operation Master Plan review. I think we're all a bit shell-shocked, having hopefully waded through it at least the first time, and I think we need more time to review this. We have a lot of work on our plate for this. We will be having a study session February 24th, which at that time the presentation will be made to the full board, or at least those in attendance. There may be some allowance for interaction of the public. We need to look into that. What do you? There will be some possibility of interaction with from the public during that study session. And we may take it up again March the 3rd. I'm sure we would discuss it. But this is something that's going to be ongoing, and I think we're going to have quite a bit of discussion and maybe take a look at this thing, and it may take some time. So this is just a start, and with that said, I think I'm going to go to item 15, and to my knowledge, there's nothing to be put on a consent agenda. There's no action to forward to the board from this committee. And I want to thank you all for your patience and your questions and your ability to sit here for 2.5 hours. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Mr. Kibler. Second. Mr. Rosales. All in favor? Aye. Motion passed. We are adjourned. Thank you.